Next up today, we have our Executive Director for the State Teachers Retirement System of Ohio. Bill Neville was selected as the 10th Executive Director of STRS this past June. Before becoming STRS Ohio's Executive Director, Bill served as STRS Ohio's General Counsel for 16 years. And prior to that, Bill was Associate Counsel at the Ohio Public Employee Retirement System. Bill's extensive experience in public retirement systems makes him well positioned to lead STRS Ohio in achieving its mission and vision. So thank you, Bill, for coming in this morning, and I'll toss it off to you.
Thank you, Mark, for that introduction. Thank you, Mary, for inviting me to speak today. I'm trying to share my screen as I speak. Hopefully I can do that. How's that? Can everyone see my my PowerPoint?
We don't have you yet there.
Not yet. Okay. How about now?
Now you're in.
Great. Again, thanks, Mark, for the invitation. Thank you all for joining us. I'm glad I'm not traversing icy roads in Ohio this morning, but I look forward to a time when we can all meet face to face and eye to eye. Zoom's a nice compromise, nice fallback for an in-person meeting, but I would vastly prefer to be speaking in front of you today. As Mark said, I can't believe it myself, my experience with public pension plans, and even before I was with OPERS, with representing the Ohio Public Employees Deferred Compensation Program, goes back over 20 years at this point. Today, I want to give you a brief history of STRS, a few impressions I have of the system from my new chair, my relatively new chair as Executive Director. Talk about some of the funding challenges we all face together, touch on our investments, a little bit about the oversight STRS has from statewide elected officials and from our board and from outside experts. I'm going to look ahead 12 to 15 to maybe 18 months down the road. It's some of the reviews and the audits that we will engage in that time, and hopefully some of the data we'll receive from those reviews. I've gotten a few questions in advance of the meeting from some of you participating today. I've tried to work in those answers to this presentation. And then, of course, as Mark has said, I'm happy to take questions through the chat function as well. So I promise we're not going to go year by year from 1920, but let's jump back to 1920 quickly and touch on why STRS was formed. At that time, pensions were provided at the local level, and half those pensions at the local school level were insolvent. The other half were headed that way. So STRS was created to take on the responsibility of providing pensions to Ohio's public educators. And we literally took on the liabilities, and liability is a word you'll probably hear throughout my presentation more times than any of us want to hear it. We took on the liabilities of those school systems. In 1921, we had 34,000 active members with only 323 retirees, and those retirees' monthly benefit was an average of $41.55. Let's fast forward 50 years. We had about 123,000 active members and 29,000 retirees. So in 1970, 4 active members for every retiree. We had healthcare coverage in 1974, and the cost of healthcare coverage in 1974 was $9.7 million annual cost. Today, we have about $4 billion of our investment assets in the healthcare fund, a fund set aside specifically and exclusively for healthcare. So when we talk about investment assets, about $4 billion of that is the healthcare fund. Alternative retirement programs were enacted in 1997 for certain university faculty. And of the faculty eligible to make an election, whether to join STRS or join an alternative retirement program, about 40% of that faculty elects the ARPs on an annual basis. Defined contribution plans followed shortly thereafter in 2000. When we talk about our investment assets, about $2 billion of those investment assets are defined contribution plan assets. So about $4 billion in healthcare right now, about $2 billion in defined contribution plan assets. Today, we have about 178,000 active members and about 157,000 benefit recipients. As you heard Director Stensrud mention about SERS, we are also a mature system. And one of the elements of that maturity is we have just about one retiree for every one active member. Some good news, the average monthly benefit has moved up a little bit over the past 101 years. A career teacher currently receives about $60,000 a year on average in pension benefits. We are one of the largest pension funds in the US. As of June 30th of last year, we manage about $78 billion in assets. My educated guess is that we're probably closer to 88 billion right now than 78 billion, somewhere around 85 to 86 billion with a little more precision. Again, some 6 billion of those assets are healthcare assets and defined benefit assets. Also, another element of a mature system, we pay out about $7.5 billion a year, about $7 billion in retirement benefits, and about $500 million in healthcare coverage. So that's about $1.3 million every day in healthcare expenses. So that 1974 annual cost of $9.7 million covers about a week of healthcare today. Our cash flow shortfall, to speak colloquially, is about $4 billion a year as we take in about $3.4 billion a year in member and employer contributions. So we need just about a 5% investment return to break even from that benefit to contribution shortfall that we experience annually. Some impressions that I have as executive director, some of them new in my new role, even though I've been around for 17 years, certainly a different perspective I have in my new capacity. One thing I knew all along is that the retirement board focuses each and every month on the financial condition of the system. The board understands active members want to lower contribution rates. They want to be able to retire sooner. We certainly understand that retirees would like to have a cost of living adjustment, and we're cognizant of the fact that our employers want pension liabilities reduced. Each employer, each school currently reports its proportionate share of STRS Ohio's unfunded liabilities on their balance sheets. So I can only speak for myself on this. I've got my current chair, a past chair, and a past chair, and I can't see the participants, but I'm guessing there are probably a couple other chairs of the board out there as well. So I can't speak for myself. I can't speak for the board, but I promise you, in my heart, I know that this board wants to pay every penny to members that we can prudently pay. Prudent, and prudence is probably the key word in that phrase, though. You think about it, a teacher walking into the classroom today has a chance that she will have a relationship with this system that extends into the next century. So the long-term sustainability of the pension fund is absolutely paramount. Some impressions of our staff. A lot of us have teachers in our families, including as do I. So this is more than just a job for us. I have had one of my outside counsel refer to it as he perceives this staff as viewing it as a sacred trust. It is legally a trust. I hesitate to use the word sacred, but that is what folks who are close to the system feel about how this staff feels about our relationship with our membership, and it is true. About 2/3 of our staff have bachelor's degrees. About a quarter of us have advanced degrees. Over 200 associates possess professional certifications like the CFA Charter, the CFA Institute Charter, or are CPAs. And we have, long before I got here, been recognized as an innovator in our industry, and we've ranked #1 in our peer group and for the last 5 groups in our customer service. So one of the questions I received in advance of this meeting is, why does the STRS staff receive COLAs? I want to make sure that I do not fail to mention that there are no automatic raises of any kind for staff. There are no COLAs for staff. Raises are based on the merit of each individual staff member. When I got here, we had over 700 associates. We have currently just over 500 associates. And anytime we have an opening, anytime we think we need a new hire, even if there's not a opening, my senior team and I sit down and we scrutinize that opening to make sure it is still a function that is necessary to meet the best interest of our membership. So you have my word, we will continue to hold the line on staffing. You have my word, again, this is what I feel, this is my opinion only, not the opinion of the board, that merit-based raises for staff are necessary to attract and to retain the qualified staff that we need, that I need, that the board needs to protect all of your interests going forward. Some of the funding challenges we face, it's not all bad news, but the challenges do remain. Last June, we received a report in October that as of last June 30th, we were at 77.4% funding. And it's probably about a 14.9 year funding period. It is not completely accurate to say we can compare this to a mortgage, but that's a little bit like having 15 years left on our mortgage before we can pay it off. In this case, the mortgage principal amount is the amount of benefits that we have, that we're obligated to pay our current set of members. As of June 30, I think it's an educated guess, we are probably somewhere north of 80% today. That's not bad news, it's good news, but staff still estimates the pension fund faces a 29% chance of dropping below 50% funded at some point in the next 10 years. One additional bit of data on that, a 1 year drop. So if we have a 1 year investment return of a -5%, our funding period increases by 10 years, so jumps to about 25 years, and our funded ratio drops 10%. One other statistic, one of the other questions that I've received is essentially why can't we afford a COLA, or why aren't we paying a COLA? Let me give you a little bit of data on the impact of the COLA. A 2% COLA results in about $12.79 billion in liabilities to the system, and increases our chance of dropping below 50% funded ratio at some point in the next 10 years from about 30% to something right around 50%. So paying a COLA increases the chance of dropping below 50% funded to just about a coin toss at some point in the next 10 years. Looking at our investment portfolio, we do have a diverse portfolio that helped us weather the COVID-19 storm. We have domestic equities, international equities, we have bonds, we have real estate, both real estate directly owned and real estate investment trusts, and we have a growing alternative investment program and some liquidity reserves or cash. Of course, we have to pay out, as I mentioned, about $500 million a month in benefits. So it is a diverse portfolio. Through December of 2020, the fiscal 2021 return, or that return since July 1st, 2020, is about 15.9%, with the majority of that coming since the month of November. Now, that's good news, very good news. But let's pause to reflect. Last March at the lows, we were down in excess of 10% for fiscal year 2020. And our funded ratio was something closer to 67%. So we are very susceptible to the volatility of the public investment markets. Another question I've received in advance: why do we pay bonuses to investment staff? STRS manages about 70% of our assets in-house, and this method saves us about $100 million a year versus what it would cost for us to send that same pool of assets, let's say, to Wall Street. And that $100 million savings is the savings after we pay all the staff salary and all the incentives. So why do we pay bonuses? Because having in-house investment talent is a very efficient way for us to run those assets. And the bonuses are, again, in my opinion, necessary to attract and retain the investment professionals we need to run that amount of assets, billions of dollars of assets in-house. Now, expenses are one side of the equation. Let's take a look at the other side of the equation, the returns. Our investment performance has been quite good for a number of years, for quite some time. Callan, our retained investment consultant, reports that the STRS Ohio investment performance has ranked in the top 20% of Callan's public fund universe for the 3, 5, 7, and 10-year periods ended September 30th, 2020. And in the 7 and 10-year period, we were actually in the top 10% or the top decile of those funds. As of the end of fiscal 2020, so as of June 30th, 2020, our 5-year return was 6.91%. That outperforms our benchmark return of 6.6%, adding about $550 million to the fund during that period. I think some more good news. Our healthcare program, as Ms. Walters and Mr. Stein have both indicated in their comments, is in good shape. As most of you know, no employer contributions are currently used to fund the retiree healthcare program, but it is currently funded at about 180%. And that means if all our assumptions are met, as the actuaries project them, the healthcare program would be sufficiently funded to provide coverage for all current members. So if we meet all of our meet all of our assumptions, the actuaries tell us that our healthcare program is funded in what they call perpetuity. Also, as most of you know, many of you know, the board was able to return $200 per enrollee to our healthcare plan participants in December. And we have held the line on the costs to our healthcare enrollees, with some 90% of health plan participants experiencing little or no increase in deductibles, out-of-pockets, or premiums in the last 6 years. Another question I've received in advance is how will STRS handle what I believe is being referred to as a forensic audit that's been talked about a lot lately. Honestly, I probably have less information about this review than many of you do. It is not a review or an audit that's being sponsored by STRS, and I'm not sure what the process or procedure for that review will be just yet. But what I can tell you about is the oversight, the layers of oversight to which STRS is subjected on a regular basis. The Ohio Retirement Study Council is the committee of the legislature that provides oversight to STRS, including fiduciary audits of all the public pensions systems, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. The Treasurer of State custodies STRS Ohio's assets. They're not literally here in the building, they're custody with the Treasurer. The Auditor of State oversees an annual financial statement audit of STRS, and the auditor is in the process of selecting a new financial statement auditor for the system as we speak. We have an internal audit team that reports directly to the board's audit committee. And speaking of the board, I'd be remiss if I didn't say the board oversees staff. They set policies, they set the asset allocation, they confirm compliance with policies, and they meet roughly 10 times a year, and some of those meetings are for multiple days. Investment performance is not calculated in investments, it's calculated in our finance department, and we have an external firm that verifies our investment performance and has been doing that annually for quite some time. That's the oversight, layers of oversight. Let's look ahead to what I would say is even more oversight, more confirmation of our financial condition. Starting late summer, early fall, we will kick off 2 studies that I see as dovetailing together, and that is the actuarial experience review and an asset liability study. I'm going to guess both those studies will wrap up in the early spring of 2022. With the actuarial experience review, our actuaries will take a look back at the last 5 years at all of our economic and demographic assumptions and let us know what our actual experience is compared to what we estimated back then. The board may well need to reset some of those economic and demographic assumptions based on that review, And if the board does change those actuarial assumptions, it could impact our funded status. Perhaps most notably, our projected investment return is one of those economic assumptions. Dovetailing with that, based on that, moving contemporaneously with that study will be an asset liability study. And that is key to setting the asset allocation based on the level of risk that our outside consultants and our inside staff think is reasonable. Also this year, in calendar 2021, I expect, based on conversations I've had with the director of the Higher Retirement Study Council, that the council will at least kick off a fiduciary audit of the system. That fiduciary audit's a ton of work. It goes on for months and months and months, but it looks at really every aspect of the system's operation and critically reviews the organizational design, the structure, and the practices of the system. I think also simultaneous with that review, the Ohio Retirement Study Council will conduct a review of our auditor, of our actuary, Chiron. So we'll have one audit from ORSC looking at how our operations are, giving us advice on how to do better on those. We'll have another audit confirming that Chiron, our actuary, is doing a good job in telling us what our assumptions need to be or what our financial condition is. And I think we probably have those studies wrapped up in the next 12 to 18 months. I can tell you, as a new executive director, I very much look forward to what those studies will tell us and how working with the board, the staff can set the course of the system for several years to come. So as those of you who know me know, I tend to jot down things that I read or that I hear that make an impact on me. And one of those statements I read several years ago really resonates with me as I look at how to manage a public pension fund, a mature public pension fund, in these tumultuous times. And that phrase was from P.W. Huntington, the founder of Huntington National Bank. The phrase is, "In prosperity, be prudent. In adversity, be patient." So, as I've said throughout my presentations, our assets, our financial condition is moving in the way that we hoped it would, but we are still vulnerable to downturns in the market. We're going to receive a lot of data, a lot of empirical data in the next 12 to 18 months that will help the board, working with staff, set the course of the system. And I would ask you all, be patient with me, be patient with us. Let us compile that data so we can make prudent decisions for the benefit of all of our members, and both active and retired. And with that, I will test the limits of my technological ability and try to get back to the chat.
Thank you very much, Bill. I appreciate it. And we do have a little bit of time for Q&A. So if you would make sure that you actually put your questions in chat. For those of you participating by phone, if you want to text your question, we'll give you a number and we'll try to get to it. It's 937-360-1554. Again, that's 937-360-1554. So a couple of questions that came up in the chat to start things off a little bit, Bill. Well, on one of them, you kind of touched on that. And I guess the question is, why can't we cut the budget of STRS so that we can pay a little bit of COLA? That's the first question that I had.
So the operating budget of STRS is roughly $100 million. The COLA creates a liability at 2% of $12.79 billion. So there is no way to reduce the operating budget sufficiently to pay really even a modest COLA. The quantum of the budget, it pales in comparison to even a modest COLA.
Right, just as on scale, if you took the amount of benefits that STRS pays out in 1 year And if you shut off the lights and fired everybody in the building, you would only pay 1 penny on every dollar of benefits that STRS pays each year. It's just a matter of billions versus millions. Let's see. The next question, I mean, how do you see COLA going in the future? That was the question that another one of our panelists asked is, what is the future of COLA? When, I guess the question is, when would you even consider paying it?
Well, what I can tell you is, sincerely, the board looks at the financial condition every month. I know anytime I speak to a board member, COLA is one of the topics we discuss. The motion that reduced the COLA to 0 said the board would look at the COLA not later than the quinquennial review we anticipate being done in March of 2022. So trying to see the future 15 months out, I would expect there will be very formal discussions about the COLA no later than March or April of 2022. And certainly, again, we look at any number of ways we could provide some inflation protection for our current retirees. The question is simply, do we jeopardize the long-term funding of the retirement system by providing inflation protection too soon? I think our actuaries would tell us these early dollars, saving these early dollars is very, very important to build the resilience of the system. Is very important to build that up before we start paying some kind of inflation protection again.
Yeah, and on that score, in terms of being able to provide some sort of inflation protection, Victoria Eckhart brings up a point. She says, thank you for keeping the healthcare costs steady and the healthcare fund well funded. And she said, if my healthcare costs avoid large increases, then that's a gain that's kind of like a COLA because it doesn't erode your income as much when healthcare costs stay lower. So I don't have any other questions here, and we're nearing the end of our time. Mary, did you get anything? You're on mute.
That's right. I didn't get anything, but I did notice there was a question about, would we be able to get a copy of your PowerPoint to share?
No problem.
Okay, thank you.
If you would send me the PDF of the PowerPoint, and then I'll ship it to Mary and she can distribute it.
Thank you.
So that concludes our presentation here today. Before we sign off, I just want to remind you that you may be getting a link to a survey in your email. Just try to gauge your pros and cons on the presentation today and things we can do to make it more accessible to you. This has been recorded, and we're going to figure out a way to make sure that it's viewable by others. And I will leave it to Mary to close things out and say so long.
Okay. Thank you all for participating. This is a new area for us to be working in, so we appreciate everyone that was able to participate today. If you have other questions, please send them to us. And thank you all, the panelists, for being here today and giving such wonderful information. Hopefully we can spread this information as we further talk and work on the STRS campaign for Rita and Bob. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Bob and Rita. And thank you, Bill, for coming in this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.